Welcome to our event to launch our new report, which we've published today in partnership with HSBC UK, called Building Back Better, How to Recover from COVID-19. Over the last year, the UK has seen job losses and in many places, the number of people claiming unemployment benefits has risen sharply, with more to come, unfortunately. In the next few years, the question of how to create new jobs will be at the top of the agenda for policymakers and central to the task of levelling up. Our new research in partnership with HSBC UK sets out in detail for the first time where and what types of jobs have been created and lost in the period running up to the pandemic, the so-called jobs miracle period. I hope its findings will help inform what needs to happen post-COVID to help people and places recover from the economic impacts of the pandemic. So that's what we're here to discuss. But before we begin, as always, the event is being recorded and will be made available along with the slides on our website after the event. During the event, your microphones will be kept on mute. If you want to tweet about the event, the hashtag is CFC Job Creation. There will be opportunities for questions to speakers. You can submit questions at any time. You don't have to wait until they're all finished. You do this by sending your question via the chat function to ask a question. And when we get to questions, if time allows, we'd like you to ask your question, so be prepared. But if you'd like me to read it out, that's fine. Just let us know when you post your question. And we'll be all done by 2:15. So let's get cracking. Let's get underway. Let me introduce my speakers. Our first speaker in a moment is my colleague, Paul Swinney. Paul is the Director of Policy and Research at the Centre for Cities, and he's going to briefly outline the main findings and recommendations from the report. After Paul has spoken, we have a panel that will offer their reflections and implications of the report for policy. My panelists are Ian Stewart. Ian is the Chief Executive of HSBC UK. Susan Hinchcliffe, Leader of Bradford City Council and Chair of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Sarah Howard, Chair of the British Chambers of Commerce, and Paul Scully MP, Minister for Small Business, Consumers and Labour Markets at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So there are our speakers and our panelists, but without further ado, Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good afternoon, everybody. Right, what I'm going to do is run you through some of the headline findings from the report. It's freely available on our website, and as ever with any Centre for Cities report, although of course I would say this, it's packed full of fantastic information. I'm just going to give you a very brief flavour of what that is, and hopefully that whets your appetite to understand or go and have a look at it and see all of the great stuff that is within there. So as Andrew said, we look at the period between 2013 and 2019, because this period was a period of a jobs miracle, but something which COVID-19 really brought to an abrupt halt. So over that 6-year period, the UK created or had more than 2.7 million more jobs in 2019 in the private sector than what they did in 2013, which is an incredible number of jobs. I mean, if we were to think back to 2010 and we were then going to forecast that would be that amount of jobs created, particularly given the political context, I think nobody would have believed you. So it is quite an amazing thing that's happened. But that 2.7 million actually only shows you the tip of the iceberg in terms of different things that were going on in the UK economy. So there's the 2.7 million there. But in order to do that, the UK economy created 19.3 million jobs, and at the same time it lost 16.6 million jobs. And this is reflective of the churn that you get in the jobs market, the churn of businesses. You have them opening and closing all of the time. And so usually when we talk about jobs growth, so when we're thinking about economic development and the growth of the economy, we only think about that net figure, in this instance, which was 2.7 million. But actually, there's a whole load more that's going on. Now, this is particularly interesting in terms of COVID and trying to recover from the current downturn that we find ourselves in. Because what we've seen is that around about 1.3 million jobs have disappeared so far on a net basis. So 1.3 million fewer jobs today than what we had in March 2020. And as Andrew suggested, that might not even be the total amount. But if that's the case, and we assume that this ratio is the same, of in order to create one job in the pre-pandemic period, we had to create 7 gross jobs to get one job to stick. So keeping that 7-to-1 ratio, what would this mean would be in order to get 1.3 million people back into work, the scale of the task is that we have to create 9.4 million jobs in the private sector in order to get those 1.3 million back into work. Shows it's pretty big task. Now, So where do these jobs come from? Where we expect to see them from a geography point of view, from a sector point of view, etc. Well, we've got lots of information of this in the report, but let me pull out 3 quick findings for you. So the first one is that the majority of jobs in that 6-year period up to 2019 were created within cities, and big cities in particular. So London created 29% of all of that 2.7 million jobs that were created, which is a huge amount just for one place to create. Now, again, there's a lot of churn within that. So what that equated to was a growth of 790,000 private sector jobs in London. But the underlying nature of that was that the capital created 4.6 million jobs and lost 3.8 million jobs. It's a huge amount of churn going on in just one place. The next 9 largest cities also meant that, combined with London, that they were creating just under half of all the jobs that we saw created on a net basis in the UK over that period. So cities playing a really central role. Now, in the next period, it might be that the percentages don't look exactly the same, but I think what this does tell us is that big cities in particular have got a really important role in terms of trying to encourage or try to get the UK out of its current position and to bounce back, not only back to where it was in March 2020, but actually to grow the economy beyond that. Fact number 2, these jobs were very much majoritively created in new businesses or branches of existing businesses. So you can see here, growth of jobs in new businesses was very big. Loss of jobs in new businesses was also very large as well, which is reflective of the fact that survival rates of new businesses tend to be very low. If you compare that to businesses that existed before this period, you can see there that there's just very little change on a relative basis in businesses that exist already. They grow, they create themselves, they grow, then they tend to be fairly stable. Whereas a lot of the churn that happens in the jobs market, a lot of the new jobs that are created are actually in the creation of new businesses and the jobs that they create. And finally, the third fact is the nature of where these jobs came from, the types of sectors. Almost 3/4 of the jobs created were in sectors that we would describe as being local services. So you can see here, an example we've got is the butchers here on the right-hand side. Happen to have excellent taste in the football team, as it happens. They're sort of, butchers, retailers, restaurants, accommodation, waste management also was another big producer of jobs as well. These sectors that very much serve a local market. They tend to be employment heavy, and they also created a lot of jobs over the period. Now, what's interesting is that these sectors in particular are the ones that are being very much affected by COVID. And so it's going to be their ability to bounce back that's really going to determine how quickly the UK can create these jobs again. And that clearly has policy implications. The second type of business we have are what we would describe as being the exporting type businesses. So they're businesses that sell beyond their local market to regional, national or international markets. And here we've got the example of Nissan, which does that. Now, these types of businesses don't tend to employ so many people, but also you can see here they didn't play a particularly big role in terms of job creation. Their job creation performance was pretty disappointing, but what was even more disappointing still was their productivity performance. Local services tend to drive jobs, exporters tend to drive productivity, and there was a big problem there from those exporters, not in terms of necessarily just job creation, which we need to think about. And again, there's a lot more on that in the report in terms of the impact on productivity and what needs to happen. So what does this then mean from a policy perspective? Well, three broad areas of policy we need to think about. We need to support job creation, trying to get the economy back on its feet, getting those people back into work, but actually increasing the total number of jobs that we have even beyond recovery. And we think that the best way to do that is through supporting job creation in jobs-heavy industries, particularly where there's an overlap with government policy. So a really good example of that would be to extend the Green Homes Grant so we can insulate the housing stock we've got to try and meet net zero targets, which will clearly have big implications for jobs that are created within the construction industry. Second one is about tackling productivity challenges. So that's about trying to incentivize business investment in research and development in particular. It's about setting out what the terms of the new Office for Investment will do, how it interacts with local areas and how it's going to get more investment in from overseas to encourage investment and job creation and productivity gains from that type of activity. And it's also about thinking about our city centres as well and investing in them and trying to make them very attractive places to do business, which will create jobs, not only in the businesses, office businesses that invest there, but actually on the high street as well. And then thirdly, institutional reform should be a focus of the government as we try to build back better. And principally, that's about trying to reorganise local government, empower local government and devolve more powers to it. So actually it's got the capacity but also the levers to pull in terms of trying to craft policy to deal with the particular challenges that each part of the country face. Because clearly Whitehall has a big role to play, but it can't do everything. And we think that local government should be playing a much bigger role than what is currently the case. As I say, the report is freely available on the website, but I shall leave it there for insights and hear from our great panelists. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Paul, for that very a great overview. As Paul said, loads more detail in the report as always, which you can cast your eye over once the event has finished. So let's hear from our panel. First up, we're going to hear from Ian Stewart, Chief Executive of HSBC UK. Ian, over to you.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much, and to Paul, and thanks to the whole team at Centre for Cities for producing such an important and credible piece of work. Now, we knew when we entered this partnership that the report was unlikely to make for easy reading, and as Paul has set out, the scale of the jobs challenge facing the UK cannot be underestimated. But we also knew as a bank we had skin in the game. We are a proud British company employing tens of thousands of people and serving millions of customers in every corner of the country. And we didn't want to shy away from this debate, which is so fundamental to our future prosperity. I want to focus my remarks on how we can take forward the levelling up agenda in light of the report's findings. Perhaps understandably, much of the debate about levelling up over recent years has centred on government action. And indeed, there has been welcome progress, whether through a renewed focus on infrastructure investment or recently been announced, moving senior jobs from Whitehall to other regions of the UK. These are important initiatives in leading by example, creating the conditions for employment and productivity to rise. But as today's report makes clear, we will only truly succeed in levelling up the country if the challenge is shared with the private sector. We will need to get behind the job creators, businesses of all sizes up and down the country, to maximise the recovery and rebalance the economy. So if I may, I'd like to focus on 3 points building on that idea. First things first, we know from experience at HSBC the benefits of building businesses in some of the UK's great cities. We run First Direct from Leeds. We run Marks and Spencer's Bank from Chester. And in establishing the head office of HSBC UK in Birmingham, we've built a business from scratch in that great city over the last 3 years. Now, it's not without its challenges, but having seen firsthand the deep talent pools, the commercial dynamism and quality of life these regions have to offer, the experience has always been positive for the bank, our people and the wider community. I would recommend that others take a wider view of location when thinking about growing or moving their operations, and encourage businesses and government to learn from each other as to how to make these moves a success. My second point is about job creation. We will always need a thriving and globally competitive capital, so levelling up can't just be about moving existing jobs around the UK. Today's research shows that unemployment can be tackled by creating new businesses, attracting high-value foreign investment, and backing our exporters across the whole of the UK. Again, government and the private sector working in tandem have vital roles to play. As a global bank, we know that there remains untapped interest among the international investor community regarding opportunities in the UK. The key question is, how do we unlock it? Critical in all of this is to make the UK an easy place in which to do business. Initiatives such as the creation of a national infrastructure bank, revisiting the UK's listing regime, and reassessing our regulatory framework will all help attract international businesses and investors to all corners of this country. We will play our part. We know that is important, but we will play our part in welcoming international business to all parts of the UK, while also backing our own exporters to grow around the world, whether with established trading partners or with high growth markets like those in the Indo-Pacific region, as recently highlighted by the government's integrated review. My final point is about instilling confidence, especially in our SMEs, because we know if we back British businesses, they in turn will drive the recovery across the country. Again, we have to share this challenge. Government can give clarity over the roadmap out of lockdown, as well as over the regulatory environment in which firms are trading, while the banking sector can provide confidence by making available the finance needed for businesses to grow. That's why we are proud to have recently announced a 15 billion SME lending fund with dedicated allocations across the UK regions to show businesses that we're right behind them as we return to a more normal way of life. In closing, while many of these issues are not new, the scale of the challenge is as great as at any time in recent memory. We all have a role to play across the public and private sector to create the conditions and provide the oxygen to energise the recovery, enabling the whole of the UK to build back better. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing the other presenters and taking part in the Q&A later. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Ian, reminding us as we sometimes need to, particularly those of us in public policy, that actually thinking about the private sector and what the private sector is up to and how we can support that is very, very, very important when we think about productivity and we think about job creation. So with that, let's move on to Susan, our second panelist, Susan Hinchcliffe, leader of Bradford and the chair of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Susan, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Ian, for the open comments and marks there. So I'm leader of Bradford, and I'm also chair of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And as such, we in the region have done a lot of thinking over the last year, really, since the pandemic started, about how we're going to recover, how we're going to rebuild from this, but not just rebuild, but build it better and level up, of course, is something that we're all trying to seek how to do at the moment. And, you know, the pandemic has shown large parts of West Yorkshire, and Bradford, obviously, from my point of view, is most preeminent of that, given the infection rates we've had over the last year. In COVID, we've been really badly hit. And if you look at the causes for that, it's low pay, insecure employment, overcrowded housing, all the things that a successful economy would put right. And I just feel at this moment in time in history, there's a real imperative to make sure this never happens to places like Bradford again, and we do build back better, truly, and make it count. Because it's tragic, because Bradford is the youngest city in the UK. Nearly 25% of our population are under the age of 16. They absolutely deserve a future, given what they've gone through over the last year, and also before that, of course. But we're also one of the other banks, actually, named as the best place in the country to start a business, for example. And the Sunday Times said we were in the top 20 cities in the UK for business growth. So we've got the success there, but it does need public intervention to enable the private sector to grow, prosper, and develop more jobs and create more wealth for people. So there's many things I agree with in the report. Skills, big tick for me on skills, I have to say. Already automation was accelerating the economic change and low skilled jobs were going, and obviously that's increased massively over the last year. So we need lifelong learning, and a lot of the things on skills I would absolutely support. R&D as well. It's been long since held belief of mine that we need to get businesses closer to universities in local areas. The two working together should be able to really generate ideas, generate innovation, and therefore jobs. And I don't think we've made enough of that connection, and they haven't either. Institutional reform. Obviously, I'm a fan of devolution, and as one of the architects of West Yorkshire devolution, we're getting a mayor in May, then you would expect me to say that. But I do think regional and local government are best placed to connect the different agencies at local level so that that money counts most and makes it go further. So I would advocate using much more passported funds to devolve settlement agreements so that actually you can get the best bang for your buck at that local level. One thing that's missing from the report is capital infrastructure, which I think really needs to happen. Somewhere like Bradford, biggest city in the UK, not on a mainline train line, and it has really held our economy back. And I think that's a real issue for us. When the report talks about planning reform, the biggest barrier for investment in Bradford is not planning, it's actually land viability. So if the land is not valuable enough, then no developer is going to build there, no matter how fleet of foot the planning regime is. So I think it's different solutions for different parts of the UK. Now, in West Yorkshire, as I said, we're getting devolution deal around the corner, and we've already got our first tranche of gain share, £38 million to spend on what we want. And we spent it on looking about implementing our own economic recovery. So we have a plan that requires 1.4 billion actually in West Yorkshire on economic recovery. 38 million isn't really the whole amount, is it? Of course. However, we're going to start as a mean to go on. And 13.5 million of that has gone into skills. Again, going back to your report. About 7 or 8 million is going to go into enterprise support. And the rest on capital programs. Now, enterprise support is interesting actually, because what is the role of business for public sector when it comes to supporting business? And I think we're having a debate at the moment about whether it's supporting those community entrepreneurs who may be from disadvantaged backgrounds, who might not otherwise be able to start a business, or is it on the high growth businesses who may generate a lot of jobs? And now anybody who's been in economic development for any length of time will know identifying high growth businesses is a very difficult thing to do because you don't know it until it's happened often. So we're having an internal debate about where the role for the public sector is in that. And I suspect it might be a bit of both, but actually seeing how we balance that in future is really important in tackling inequalities. Again, perhaps our role is more in community entrepreneurship than supporting high growth businesses that are going to grow anywhere. But again, that's going to be a matter for debate. And of course, capital programs also lead to the new green economy, which I think there's a real potential in, and we need to do more at. So again, from a devolved settlement point of view, we'll be increasingly spending more of our money on that. So many things I agree with in this report. I'd add some more things in as well, as you'd expect me to, but it's a really historic moment in time is this. We need to be all working together, local, regional and national governments, on a joined up plan for a vision for our nation in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years even, and stick to that. So long-term investments create economic shift that actually our residents deserve after what they've been through. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan. I can always rely on you to keep us on our toes. Susan, tell us what we've got right, tell us what we've missed out, and tell us where we should be going next. So I'm always deeply appreciative of you doing that. Let's hear from Sarah Howard, the chair of the British Chambers of Commerce. Sarah, give us your thoughts on the job creation and productivity challenges as you see them.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me to join you today. For those who don't know, my name's Sarah Howard. I'm the chair of the British Chambers of Commerce. And the British Chambers represents 53 UK-based chambers of commerce across the country, who in turn represent 75,000 businesses, employing around 6 million people. So we have members in every town and city. Chambers have been supporting businesses throughout the pandemic, and these local networks will ensure place and business communities play a key role in driving on the UK's economic recovery. Before I share some insights into what we hear when we speak to businesses about their priorities for recovery of COVID, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome this report from Centre for Cities. Its focus on measures to create jobs and boost productivity to improve long-term prosperity could not have come at a better time. The government's extension of key support schemes was a welcome confidence booster to firms planning for their reopening. Should there be any deviation from the exit strategy, we must have discussions about how we support schemes to correspond and support this. More broadly, however, we believe there are actions that the government can take in order to drive the short-term recovery. This could be focused in two areas: encouraging private sector investment, for example, by expanding the 1 million annual investment allowance to include COVID-related investments, training, and those that help businesses achieve net zero, and supporting young people into the labour market, including by a temporary cut to employer national insurance contributions. Longer term, there's a need to fix the fundamentals. COVID has changed the temporary base, but there is still plenty of work to be done. Levelling up in some guise has been an ambition for many, many governments. Chambers of Commerce, with their roots in local business communities, are innately aware of the long-standing issues in local areas and are partnered for addressing these and increasing economic growth, jobs and wealth everywhere. The most significant are human capital, including skills, infrastructure, including connectivity, and fiscal capital. BCC will work with government to ensure that we are giving business access to the skills they need, delivering on promises of accelerated infrastructure projects such as HS2 and NPR, and supporting investment in digital connectivity. Working in partnership with business to develop long-term proposals to meet net zero ambitions and working to minimise the upfront costs for business. There are other challenges which we hope to work with government and our local business communities to address. These include the shift to hybrid working, which, as we've seen in the pandemic, is likely to be a feature of our working lives for some time to come. We need to work towards solutions that support cities and urban towns to adapt to this, whether it relates to transport systems or the service businesses that rely on workers for income. We must ensure that businesses that are implementing hybrid working remain productive and competitive. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, and the report references, there is a need to ensure businesses have the skills they need. That has been a long-term challenge, but with the sorts of jobs people do changing, such as move to green jobs, it is one to focus on. BCC is working towards the final report of our Workplace Training and Development Commission at the moment, which is supported by Centre for Cities. It considered the long-standing challenges firms faced in recruitment and interim recommendations, including supporting greater investment in training, supporting investment in digital skills, and flexible qualifications, bite-sized training, so people can reskill in work as well as out of it. Finally, we need to see real commitment from government that levelling up equals economic growth in every part of the country, whilst addressing regional imbalances. This means working with business communities across every region and nation to ensure they are empowered to drive what works best for their local areas. Chambers and their member businesses are keen to get back to doing what they do, business, and we look to actively drive the country's economic recovery. My hope is that we can work with the Minister and the government in order to create the best possible conditions for this and a wider economic growth aspirations, bringing prosperity to every region and every nation. Thank you very much for inviting me, Andrew.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Again, ideas in terms of what could be done in the very short term, as well as then setting out some of the agenda for the longer term, and a common theme both with you and Susan around skills, how we can improve the sorry state in some respects of the skills system, certainly parts of it. At least maybe we'll get you to say a little bit more about that in a second. But let's hear from the Minister. Paul, thank you very much for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks, Paul, for presenting the report, which is incredibly timely. Really pleased to be here to discuss that. And as the Minister for Small Business and someone that ran small businesses for 25 odd years before being elected, really interesting to see those stats about the new jobs coming from new companies that are often, in their very nature, start off small. But your report focused on those three sets of core actions: creating jobs, boosting productivity, and institutional reform. And we've already heard from Ian, Susan and Sarah more calls from various organisations and businesses to how to develop that. And it's important that we do work together on all three of those areas. Levelling up across the country absolutely remains at the centre of this government's agenda. And in terms of, we want to make sure that we can empower our regions through devolving money, resources and control away from Westminster. I happen to be the Minister for London, so in terms of the work around cities you're doing, I've got a vested interest in working around joining up government in getting London reopened, recovered and making it more resilient. But clearly there's that wider piece of work to do beyond that across the country. And it was great to, just this morning I was on a call with Lancashire County Council on all the district and borough councils there as well, working through how we can further devolve power, because they know their local economy in Lancashire better than anybody here in Whitehall. And it's that collaborative working that will actually be able to tackle the productivity and able to create jobs and therefore prosper beyond that. The spending review delivered £100 billion in investment coming up this year, with the plans to invest over £600 billion over the next 5 years. That's the highest sustained levels of public sector net investment as a proportion of GDP since the late 1970s. And then included in that is the new Levelling Up Fund, which will directly support communities in all of the nations with up to £4.8 billion for local infrastructure. That's going to have a visible impact, and a really visible impact on people and their communities, and will directly support economic recovery. And we need to make sure that we continue to work with local leaders to ensure that every region, city and town, will recover from COVID-19 and ultimately level up. The package of support for businesses that are required to close or which are severely affected by the restrictions put in place to tackle COVID-19 and save lives has been unprecedented. Now, we've put £407 billion worth of support into to supporting businesses, livelihoods, and protecting jobs. And so that gives us 407 billion reasons to make sure that we help shape the next period and continue to protect those jobs and livelihoods and manage to bounce back as well. The new Restart grant, for example, available for April, there's 25, with that, there's £25 billion in total that would have gone out in terms of business grants available to support businesses through these difficult times. And we've extended the coronavirus job retention scheme to September, and the self-employment income support scheme is now going to have a fourth and a fifth grant, with 600,000 more people being eligible for that grant as well, who became self-employed between 2019 and 20. And to help accelerate recovery and to smooth the transition to the new equilibrium, the return of 4 key groups back to the city centres is absolutely vital. Office workers, students, domestic tourists, and international visitors. And so we're proposing a phased approach to address each of those. That's phase 1 to prepare, then to a controlled reopening, and a return to the city, that third phase. And we're hoping for the best, but we're preparing for the worst in doing that. So to make sure that we've got a resilient plan. There's lots of work underway within this, and although government departments are generally moving forward with work which supports reopening, it could be that interventions currently planned are insufficient, and that's why we need to monitor and to prepare for that worst case scenario, but also making sure that we're reaching out and collaborating with people on the ground in their local areas. So in terms of job creation, as confirmed in the government's Build Back Better plan for growth, will support productivity growth through high quality skills and training. Will transform further education through additional investment and reforming technical education to align the post-16 technical education system with employer demand. Will introduce the lifetime skills guarantee to enable lifelong learning through free, fully funded level 3 courses, rolling out employer-led skills boot camps, and introducing the lifelong loan entitlement. Looking ahead, as the roadmap for the current lockdown is rolled out, the government will continue to provide support to all types of businesses throughout our core services, including gov.uk, the free phone business support helpline, and the network of the 38 growth hubs operating in England. It's so important that we get the levelling up, the devolution right, and work with you. As a former councillor myself, I value devolution, I value power and decision making being taken at the as close to those affected as possible. And so we will continue to work through our planned white paper to see what more we can do to have that collaborative working with local authorities, with the metro mayors, and with all of the institutions around there, the growth hubs, the universities, and local skills providers. But back to you. Look forward to listening to your thoughts.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Paul. A real rattle through lots of the different initiatives and schemes on offer. Susan, I know you have to leave us slightly early, so I wanted to come back to you first off. You talked right at the beginning of your opening comments about the role of the public, as it were, in the public sector in providing confidence and clarity for the private sector in Bradford, particularly then to come on invest. And I wonder, are there particular things that the business community in Bradford is saying that they desperately need from you or from the public sector more generally to provide that confidence? What would be the top of your list?
So Sarah mentioned the connectivity word, which is absolutely key, I think, to a place like Bradford and West Yorkshire. So we need Northern Powerhouse Rail going from Leeds, Bradford over to Manchester. We need West Yorkshire Mass Transit connecting, doing that intra-regional connectivity. And of course, NHS2 going down from Leeds down through the Midlands. And that is absolutely vital. And I think, you know, businesses that are connected together, they just generate more growth and more jobs, and it limits their horizons by not providing that connectivity. So connectivity will be absolutely number one thing. And I usually mention three things, which is transport connectivity, skills, and actually culture, to make a place a great place to live. And if you get those three things right, then I don't think you can go far wrong. That would be my view.
Yeah, it's very good. A great set of responses. Sarah, a similar question to you. And Susan, when you need to leave, just wave your hand and gracefully exit from the virtual room. But it's great to have you, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. But Sarah, a similar question, I suppose, from you. What is it that what's the thing, or the one thing, or the couple of things that the public sector can do to really boost the confidence of the business community to take forward those investment opportunities, those investment plans?
There are a couple of things. I'd like to see R&D tax credits really looked at. They seem to be contracting at the moment, and I think that's something that we should be expanding and looking at more ways of using them to encourage R&D in the future. And I think as much support for skills as we can get. The white paper has some fascinating ideas in it, and I think that's going to move it forward. I've got a really example of a local college I support that is working really, really closely with businesses to produce the talent and the skills they need rather than what they've traditionally done. So I think, again, it's not rocket science, is it? A focus on skills, a focus on bringing money back into the businesses rather than having to hand it out in taxes all the time.
Yeah. And Minister, obviously, great interventions are on, for example, the furlough scheme and others. In a sense, where now for the government as those begin to tail off, as restrictions ease? When do you think we will see the next raft of interventions that will replace them?
Well, I think we've already started. So we've encouraging investment in people's business. We've also, not least for small businesses, that you said, it's the Help to Grow initiative. I thought was quite eye-catching for me as the minister, and also as a previous small business owner, because then it's how do you get people to invest in themselves in terms of leadership and management, but also digitalization. And that themselves can then they can start to build up in that new economy and almost create the new jobs that we don't even know exists yet, because we want to build it. We've heard all the speakers have used the phrase "build back better," but it's also about building back greener. And so we're putting £12.5 billion into investment in that area, which we expect to leverage 3 times that amount of money from the private sector, and create 250,000 new jobs based on that. And these are the kind of jobs that, as I say, at the moment, many of those won't even exist. So this is the long-term view that we've already started taking.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Ian, obviously, as a part, head of a big banking institution, we've had several questions about, ensuring that, or how do we ensure that there is the ready supply of finance and investment to support firms either that are looking to expand or looking to come into existence, and how do we make sure that gets to all of the firms that need it? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, actually. Excuse me. And as we come out of the lockdown, I think a lot of businesses will need working capital to take advantage of the bounce back. I'm in the optimistic camp. I think there will be a significant bounce back. It may take slightly longer than we think, but if you look at the amount of money we've got sitting on account today, it's billions of pounds. I think a lot of that will go back into the economy. But if businesses don't have the capital to restock and to be able to take advantage of that bounce back, then that will be a very sad situation. So our job, we've got a very important part to play in society today, is to be working with businesses today, now, to get them prepared for coming out of the lockdown to take advantage of it. And at the same time, we've got a great entrepreneurial skill set in the UK. We always have done. We are very resilient in the UK. And if we can encourage and make getting into business or starting a business easier and give people a good start on that, I think that will really help as well. So there's no lack of enthusiasm or excitement, but I think we're going to have to work very hard over the next 6 to 7 months to make sure businesses do have the oxygen to capture the opportunities, which will undoubtedly come over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, no, it's a great response. Susan, I'm going to take advantage you're still on the call, so I'm going to ping another question to you. We've had several on this front. I mean, you know, cities, places like Bradford, I mean, where do you think they are on the government's agenda in relation to levelling up? You know, we hear about everywhere and something for everything and, you know, all the right, but your thoughts on how central is Bradford to the levelling up agenda, and do we need to work harder to make sure that it remains central? And I'll get the Minister to respond as well. Susan.
Yes, yeah, in Bradford, we always have to work hard for everything we get. And I tell you, I'll give you a better answer to that when the integrated rail plan is out in May, because then I'll know whether the government has listened to our pleas beyond Northern Powerhouse Rail. But I genuinely think, the government want to level up, and I think that is absolutely the right phrase. How they do it is the big question. And if we try and level up everywhere at once to the same degree, obviously by definition that can't work. And I think there are some difficult decisions there for government to take about which regions they back perhaps more substantially than others who may have already had substantial economic growth over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So obviously, as West Yorkshire and Bradford, I'd like to see us catching up more with economic growth, which we've not felt the benefit of for many, many years. And if the government really could make sure that Bradford prospered with all these young people, then I think that would be a real flagship to show what levelling up actually means. But it does mean some big, bold decisions. And it means that some people might not be happy that levelling up doesn't mean everywhere gets the same amount of money. And I think that is politically, obviously, that's a difficult thing to do. But that's obviously what I'll be pushing for as Bradford, to make sure that we get investment on skills, get investment on transport, regeneration for our town city centres. You know, we're putting a lot of our own money in as a local authority, and as government absolutely rightly would expect us to do so, but we want to be a joint partner with that investment plan with government.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Susan. And I'll bring in the Minister in a second, but my colleague Paul, just remind us of the nature of the period that we looked at, 13 to 19, and the sort of urban element to the jobs that we saw over that period.
So looking at the 10 largest cities, including London, it was just under half of all jobs were created within those cities. Excuse me. So it was very much city focused, but large city focused in particular. Now, again, exactly what the patterns will look like in the coming years, we don't know the exact percentages, of course. But I think that what that does underline at least is that, you know, cities are going to play a big role in that, but the biggest cities in particular are going to be very important drivers, not just of that overall sort of job creation, but actually of the gross jobs created as well, because they're big places and big places of opportunity and big jobs markets.
And that tells us something about, you know, the underlying preferences that firms have, that workers have, that consumers have as to where they want to be located, where they want to go and do their, do their business. And we need to be mindful of that when we then introduce policy. Paul, Minister. Not helpful having two Pauls on the panel.
Paul's absolutely fine.
Paul S's as well. So I'm going to refer to you as Minister, Paula, if that's all right with you. But, you know, just your response on that, you know, levelling up, we hear this a lot, rightly. This is not an either or, you know, but the geography of the country and the economy is not flat, and we need to be more respectful and understanding of that. Just your thoughts on that and the role of cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, Susan was talking about connectivity. She's absolutely right. I mean, there's two types of connectivity, I guess you can include in that. There's the transport calls that are heard loud and clear there, Susan. But she's absolutely right, because, you know, we always, the political discourse often talks about HS2 going up and down the spine of the country, but it doesn't talk enough about going across the country, and within each city, you'll typically get the same. Certainly in London, you know, you can get in and out of the city to the suburbs quite easily. Getting around the suburbs, going radially, is always a challenge, and that's pretty well the same across the country in many parts. The second connectivity, though, of course, is digital, is broadband, and making sure that we've got the right broadband and sufficiently strong, faster internet to connect people that way. What that enables us to do is to harness that blended working, the hybrid working that's likely to come in, that baked behaviour change behind COVID. But again, sometimes for the policymakers and the civil servants and the politicians that are making decisions from Whitehall, and this is why devolution is so important, levelling up can just mean things like, okay, let's look at Manchester and Birmingham, and then we're done, and then we can walk away thinking we've done a great job. But clearly, we know that is just not the case, and that's just a sort of a southern stereotype, if you want to put it that way. So that's why we need to make sure that we can. That's why we put our new hub in Darlington. That's why we're talking to areas in Lancashire, like Blackpool, for example, to see what more we can do with civil service. That's why it's so important that we work with Susan and people in Bradford to make sure that we are truly levelling up. And the levelling up fund itself is based on business cases. It's based on bids coming in. If the work, and if they work, then they succeed, and it's the right that we invest, rather than just someone pointing out on a map to see where someone from Whitehall thinks the best place to do it to level up is.
Okay, very good. So I want to move on and get you to come in, Ian, and then Sarah on this, which is, we've had several questions on the working from home experience, as it were. Obviously, you said, Ian, that you're in the process of establishing your new HQ slap bang in the middle of Birmingham, which is great news. Has anything changed in your view over the last 12 months? I mean, how does that program now move forward in that context? And I get Sarah, they say something about how this kind of process has affected some of her members as well. But Ian, over to you first.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. We seem to have gathered huge amounts of column headlines over what was quite a casual comment regarding using our offices a little bit less in the years ahead. We didn't put a time scale behind that, but I can assure you we're looking at over a long period of time. I think the key to this will be flexibility. It won't change our position in our new head office in Birmingham. It's a stunning building. It's a great environment to work in. I miss it desperately. I'm actually in our office today because I had to come in and get some technology changed today. So I'm in London today. But I think the key word will be flexibility, and it depends who you ask. I can only really talk about our own organisation at the moment. We are speaking to a lot of organisations about plans, and I think most are in the planning stage. But let me just tell you where we are. If you look at people who are, I would say, in their 20s, a lot of them are living at home with their parents, or they're living in very small apartments. That is no fun working at home at that. So they're really keen to come back. We've also got a lot of people, I would say 55, a little bit older, who for whatever reason live on their own. Their whole social life is around their work. They're desperate to come back as well. So we've got a real mix. And then you've got other people who have maybe got a 1 hour commute in the morning and an hour commute at night. They're not quite so keen to rush back to the office. And so it's working with all of our people, and that's about 40,000 people in the UK, to try and work out what is best. But we've always got to remember that we are dealing with 15.5 million customers. That's how many customers we've got in the UK, and that comes first. And if we can service our customers in different ways, then that's terrific. But it will be flexible. It will be something of a hybrid model. But I think if you take a straw poll today, there's still an awful lot of people looking forward to getting back to something like normality, going into the city centres, going into their town centres, grabbing a coffee en route. The little things in life that we took for granted for years that were taken away from us, I think there's an awful lot of people want that back, myself included, and we'll just see where it goes over the next couple of years. But it will be flexible, no question about that.
Brilliant, great. Sarah, your thoughts on this? How have you seen, I suppose, the last 12 months and how it's changed working behaviours? How has that affected your members, and what do you think is going to happen into the into the future.
And what Ian's making me jealous just talking about going and getting a takeaway coffee. And I think a lot of us are now feeling like that. We've got obviously we cover every industry in our membership. But if you look at the service industries that have been able to work from home, there is a real appetite to continue to do that hybrid. And we are looking at how we're using our office spaces better as well. I've had quite a few members who have actually now been able to shut their offices, particularly in software. I run a software company. We've now shut our office. We're all working remotely and we'll come together in shared space that we will just rent as and when we need it.
Yeah.
Massive change from that perspective. My concern is, as Ian alluded to, the younger people coming through. So if you've got people who are new graduates, they need to be in that office situation where they can effectively look over their shoulder and ask a stupid question and get a quick answer and progress through. And I know from my own experience, my daughter's in that situation, and it slowed things down. It slowed those relationships, and it also, they miss out on learning from the people that are already there, just how to talk to their clients and their customers. So there's a real appetite to get those people back in.
Yes.
I don't think many of our members will go back to 100% in, even when the restrictions have all gone. But there's growing acceptance that we need office space. We
Yes.
need to be together. We cannot carry on working like this completely. It needs to move forward to just bring everyone together. So there's a need to have that certainty of when we can do that as well, so we can start planning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Can I say, Andrew, can I say, because
yeah, of course you have to go, Minister, so I'll give you, say your piece on this. Yeah.
No, yeah, very much. Only so much though, because there's huge benefits for businesses to have flexible working, which isn't the same as permanently working from home for the reasons that you've heard, because that's effectively living at work. And so it's so important that, yes, we do allow people to mix, and especially younger people to get that career progression. There's nothing like having someone that's been in the business 20 years and just learning from them. And so many Zoom calls or Teams calls are basically like the Truman Show of reality. It's someone's curated that group around you. You haven't got that informal approach. But from a city point of view, clearly, the opposite side of that is that we need to, all of the things that make a city a fantastic place to live and work is all the culture around it, the hospitality that we talked about. We're social beings. So how do we work with both of those to make sure that by the time we get back into work, whether that's full-time or flexibly, that all of those institutions are still there, because they can't be there forever just waiting for us to return. So there's a body of work, a single message that we're going to have to do is say, come into the city, it's fine, it's safe, it's warm welcome for you. So there's lots to think about.
No, and do you envisage, so on that last point, Paul, do you envisage the government at some point doing precisely that? Well, I don't know exactly what, but being a bit more deliberate about saying, it's safe, our cities are open, we need to come out and in the appropriate time and in the appropriate fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. But it needs to go with the grain, clearly. There's no point us just sitting there saying, come in, the water's warm. It's about working with people, what they want to be doing with businesses, and having a single coherent message that comes from, not just from a central government, but with the mayors, with the boroughs, and with businesses amplifying those messages as well. So we're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I know you have to leave us shortly. So again, I'll leave you to disappear as appropriate. But thank you very much again, Paul, for being with us today. Much appreciated. We'll carry on the conversation for certain. Thank you very much indeed. Ian and Sarah, I want to pick up because Paul can come in, my Paul on this one. Can come up on this one. Both of you raised the central importance of skills, and we've all been around long enough to know that we always complain and wish it to be different, and yet we have another. So just say something more about how do we make progress on this, these underlying kind of skills questions, making sure that our workforce have the skills that are needed. Ian, what HSBC's view on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is incredibly important. I didn't touch on it too much in my words in the opening introduction, but it's huge for us. And people will think I'm humorous when I say this. I'm not being humorous at all. Today we are hiring behavioral scientists. If somebody had said to me even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, look, Ian, you're going to be under some pressure to get some of these new skills, I would have laughed if somebody had said you'll be hiring behavioral scientists. But that's really important to us now because we've got so much data about all our customers, and it's how we use that data for the right reasons to give our customers a better service. And you're going to hear new terminology on, especially in the retail world, of just how detailed we can be on every single customer, and customers will demand that, so that everyone gets what is really a made-to-measure suit by way of a banking product. So it's incredible the new skills that we're going to need, and digital's moving at a ferocious pace, and we have to keep up with that. And the reason we have to keep up with it is because our customers demand it. So as we're moving things along, the skills we don't have really deep in our toolkit today. And one other thing that, when I joined banking decades ago, nobody said to me I'd have to learn about empathy. And that's a big thing we try and educate our people today. Unless you can put yourself in the customer's shoes and really understand how the customer's feeling, then you'll probably struggle in banking. So empathy has become a very important skill, which is something we've now got to start teaching our people. So it really is moving at a tremendous pace, and we have to keep investing in the skills.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I mean, obviously, we often talk about the sort of public-facing side of the skills question. You're obviously dealing with your members all the time. What can we do to encourage them to invest more in their skills as well? In a sense, yes, we need the public sector to do what they need to do, but we need our businesses to be doing more in the skills development space as well. So just some thoughts on that.
I think turn it round slightly. Our businesses are very aware that they have to be digitally up to date, and also looking at the green agenda to attract the right people into their business as well. We're finding that people are becoming more and more aware of the social responsibility of a business if they join it. They want to know what we're doing about our green agenda. They want to know how we're going to achieve carbon neutrality in our business. So we have to work more closely with education. And again, going back to the white paper, the Skills for Jobs, I think that is the way forward, to just bring education and business that much closer. And the work we're doing with chambers around the country, you've got John Bridge here as one of our chamber chief execs from Cambridgeshire, doing amazing work, bringing education and business together and making education think about what business really needs. And that does require businesses to be involved in that. They can't magically produce the right people if business isn't involved in that conversation. So we're doing a lot of work around that, and to really make sure that the skills we're looking at are the ones we need in 5 years' time as well, not just what we need immediately, but building those relationships up so we understand what we need and education understands what we're going to need as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Paul, we bang on about skills all the time, in a sense, the importance of it, not just to the individual or to the firm, but to cities and urban areas as well. Just say something about that.
Yeah, so when we look at economic performance across the country, the biggest predictor of how well different cities do is how highly skilled their workforce is. But actually, when we've looked at just beyond our sixth level of towns down, we see the same thing plays out there as well. And that if we're looking at unemployment rates, they tend to be lower in places where in towns where skills levels are higher too. So this is something that isn't just a city or big city issue. This is something that affects all parts of the country. Now, in terms of policy, as Sarah had said, the FE white paper that got released a month ago or 2 months ago was very promising, but there isn't as yet any real funding behind it, and there certainly wasn't anything in the budget about that. I think that's a challenge, given that FE has been the correlation of the skills system, not only over the last sort of 10 years of austerity spending, but also in the 10 years before that as well, up until the global financial crisis. So there's a big issue about spending. I think from a firm perspective, and Ian was talking about this, is that there's also development of skills within an organisation which comes from face-to-face interaction. I think particularly with younger colleagues, people just starting out and trying to learn from people who've got a lot of experience in their industry, that's pretty important as well, and that is literally from being in the same room as other people. So I think they've got a slight concern there about, depending how large the work from home practice becomes, what does that then mean in terms of sort of skills, not only just hard skills, but actually some of those softer skills around empathy, etc. as well.
Excellent. We could go on, but unfortunately it is 2:15, so we need to come to a close. Let me give my thanks to all of our brilliant speakers. Obviously, the three that are still with us, Ian, Sarah and Paul. Thank you very much. And obviously Susan and the Minister in their absence. Thank you all for being with us today. Thanks to HSBC UK for partnering with us on the event and on the research as well. Thank you all for joining. We've had loads of people on the event and for posting lots of your questions. We got through some of them, but we never get through all of them. If you want to listen back to the recording of the event or look at the slides that Paul introduced earlier on, or indeed read the report, you can get all of them on our website, centreforcities.org. Our next event is next Monday, so a week today, the 29th of March. It's at 11 o'clock, slightly earlier. We'll be joined by colleagues from the OECD, and we'll be talking about their new research, which is looking at the relationship between devolution and productivity across European cities. So please join us there. Hope to see you some. But until the next time, take care and stay safe. Thank you very much for being with us today. Bye-bye.